In this fourth part of Gog and Magog, we are going to continue from where we left the lecture. And basically, it is going to help us today to see whose are those names that appear. To what nations were they referring to years ago? Do they have anything to do with nations today? I'll tell you that this is not the last that we are going to see referring to this, strictly talking about the names and who the nations were referring to these names. Because we will continue to see from other texts, other references, and come to a series of conclusions, of course. But we must continue step by step to be able to comprehend everything much better, and especially to ask in prayer for the Holy Spirit to fall upon us and help us understand. Yes, because without the comprehension that the Holy Spirit gives us, we won't be going anywhere. We ask the Lord in the name of Jesus, and we will understand much more, definitely. But again I say, step by step, because many things are said about Gog and Magog, and we must see the difference between what is true, and not only this, but the details of the truth, that do not always fit with that said by those who have part of the truth. Let's begin. Well, as I was saying, we are going to see, above all, the countries that are quoted there in those texts of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And we will continue the lecture from where we left it in the tome 4 and volume 4 of the Adventist Bible Commentary, where it gives us a verse by verse description and sometimes even more, giving an explanation to the biblical text. Let's take a look at all these people or nations. And I'll say again, this we are going to see here, but we are also going to take a look at these names from other sources, where they get to other conclusions. And we must, with all this information, bring out the clean part of all of it, what is truly correct. Well, let's start from Meshech, which is one of the names that is quoted there. Meshech. The name appears 9 times in the scriptures, in Genesis 10:2 and the First of Chronicles 1:5. Meshech is listed as one of the sons of Japheth, therefore one of the 3 sons of Noah, that after getting out of the ark takes a certain direction. After some time the sons of Japheth are the ones that went to the area of Europe, and something else, of course. In the First of Chronicles 1:17, a likely scribal error lists Meshech as one of the sons of Shem, but doubtless Mash was intended, in harmony with Genesis 10:23. The other 6 occurrences refer to Meshech as a nation. 3 of these are in Ezekiel 38:39, 2 are in chapters 27:13, 32:26, and the remaining reference is in Psalms 125. According to the Septuagint, Meshech should also be read in Isaiah 66:19 instead of that draw the bow. See how sometimes one word can take you to different meanings and not always the correct one. In all 5 of its occurrences in Ezekiel, as well as in Genesis 10:2 and the First of Chronicles 1:5, it is coupled with Tubal, indicating that the descendants of Japheth are intended. Ezekiel speaks of them as merchants trading with Tyre in vessels of brass, as well as in slaves, as seen in chapters 27 verse 13. In Psalms they are described as inclined for war, as in Psalms 127. So we can begin to see the association and what it is all about. Historically, Meshech is believed to represent the Moschians of the Greek classical writers, as quoted in Herodotus, meaning the Mushku of the Assyrian inscriptions, as seen in Genesis 10:2. Some writers, who find Russia in the sound Rosh, also find Moscow in the sound Meshech or Mushku, and believed that the city may have been founded by descendants of the Mushku. However, according to the Encyclopaedia Britannica 1974, Moscow was not established until the 12th century by George Dolgoruki. No trace of connection between the two names can be found. This is an explanation to all this given here. Now let's see what they say referring to Tubal. This name appears 8 times in the scriptures. In Genesis 10:2 and the 1st of Chronicles 1:5. Tubal is listed as one of the sons of Japheth. It occurs in Isaiah 66:19, where the Septuagint has Meshech also. See the foregoing discussion of Meshech. It says, in Ezekiel it is mentioned 5 times, chapters 27:13, 22:26, 38:2 and 3, and 39:1, in every case coupled with Meshach. The compound Tubal-Cain appears twice in Genesis 4:22 as the name of the son of Lamech and Zillah. Historically, Tubal has been identified with the Tiberenians, in Greek Tiberenio, mentioned in Herodotus, and with Tabal of the Assyrian inscriptions, as seen on Genesis 10:2. Those who hold that Rosh represents Russia attempt to find in Tubal a reference to Tobolsk. The only basis of equating the two is similarity of sound, and such basis is scarcely tenable. Tobolsk was not founded until 1587 by the Cossacks, and is an unimportant town. The fact that there were other countries that occupied a much greater place in history than those mentioned in the chapter 38 of Ezekiel suggests the thought that exact identity is perhaps not the object of prophecy. Israel was to know that a vast concourse of people would oppose its future rise to national and spiritual greatness. Precisely who the nations were that would play a leading role in the immense confederacy was more or less beside the point, since virtually all heathen powers in opposition to God were to be included. The selection and enumeration of certain nations was probably no more than of a poetic imagery. Similarly, in its application to the present time, inasmuch as all nations will join with Satan in his final struggle against the government of heaven, no special point is achieved by attempting to identify only a few of the nations. Well, this as always can be debatable, since these are really kind of half guesses. Take a look, we are going to reread what we have just read, so that we can realize that what they are saying that it could be or could not be. Let's repeat. The fact that there were other countries that occupied a much greater place in history than those mentioned in the chapter 38 suggests the thought that exact identity is perhaps not the object of the prophecy. It suggests it, but is it really like this? Or does it truly want to give the name of those nations? To be able to identify them for something. See that once more we must remember what we presented of what they themselves have written here. How they said that this could be one thing surely, and that is after the millennium. But we have also seen that there is something that is going to happen just before the millennium begins, before the second coming of Christ against God's people. Also, yes, just like after the millennium. But also there was another thing that was left floating in the air, of something that could happen in our days and have a place fully in this prophecy. But not all can be applied, because as it says here later, this nation of Israel did not do what it was supposed to, and therefore the prophecy, as conditional it was, could not be fulfilled completely. But what about partially? It could be, right? Well, that is what this is about, and there is some things that we must consider seriously. Is this just a question of the future? Or is it as well something for our times? As I said, we are going to analyze what they say and to what nations and people they locate these names. But this is not the only source that we are going to consult. We will see more, and at the end we will get to our own conclusions, evidently. And more, remembering that we are living in 2022, and with a series of events that are occurring, and that this was written quite some years ago. Once more, we will show some things that will surprise many people, and above all to the Adventists themselves. Yes, from where it is extracted, but from other sources, from another time, much longer ago, and this must make us consider many things, to see if at the end, when we finish all these conferences of Gog and Magog, the conclusion that we get to is correct or not. Now, as I was saying, they show it as if these events could not happen anymore. But is all of it that could not happen anymore? Or is there a part of this that will happen? They say that at the end it is no more than a poetic imagery. It is not to detail exactly who is who, but that is a speculation. What if it is telling us specifically the names of those nations because something was going to happen? If not at the moment that the prophecy was supposed to be fulfilled, but for a later time, in our time, well, we must study this with the help of God. Let's continue with verse 4. I will turn thee back, I will make you come back, and I will make you turn around, says the Version Bible of Jerusalem. Not from Palestine, but rather from some purpose impelling Gog, in order to bring him against the Holy Land. This is interesting what it is saying here, because see that it is saying that God does not make Gog turn around from Palestine, but from some other purpose in order to bring him against the Holy Land. Therefore, if there were a conflict like the one that is determined here, that aggressor would not go directly against the Holy Land. Instead, it would go first against some other land, some other place, against some other power or leaders, and then afterwards the Lord would make it turn around to go somewhere else, which in this case would be the Holy Land, to which area, what is now the actual Israel. This must make us think, and a lot, because it is said here as if it has no importance, but it is of vital importance. This translation said here, I will turn thee back. It is very interesting. Let's continue. This is made clear by the context here and in chapter 39 verse 2. The figure is that of an unruly beast that is bent on taking its own way, but is directed by a superior power. The power is here represented as that of the Lord, since frequently in the scriptures God is said to do that which he permits Satan to do, as seen on the 2nd of Chronicles chapter 18 verse 18 and Ezekiel 38:10. Yes, the Lord allows some things to happen that are caused by Satan, and then it is taken as if he, the Lord himself, had done it. But how interesting it is to see that it describes the manner it could happen. Could this be happening now, very soon? A certain power, this Gog, that first goes to battle, to war in certain places, and then takes his center of attention and his enterprise to the Holy Land, to today's area of Israel. And as I was saying, as they themselves have made reference in this text, and as we have seen in the previous conference, that some parts would be fulfilled and some others wouldn't, because of the timing, because of the situation, or because not everything was fulfilled literally when it was supposed to. But what about now? Notice that I am only giving pieces of information so that each one of you can reach to your own conclusions, but that are coming to be quite evident. The text continues saying, hooks into thy jaws, and it quotes chapter 29 verse 4, which is this one. But I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause the fish of thy rivers to stick unto thy scales, and I will bring thee up out of the midst of the rivers, and all the fish of the rivers shall stick unto thy scales. This is what Ezekiel chapter 29 verse 4 says. And of course you can say, well, what is this about hooks in thy jaws? Well, Herodotus, a famous historian, describes how the Egyptians caught the Nile crocodiles with baited hooks. God would break the stubborn pride of this boastful monarch. Yes, this is the application that there was for Gog. It is interesting to see how they got the crocodiles out of the Nile with baited hooks. This is hooks into thy jaws. Well, let's continue to see more. This is what it says analyzing the following verses. All thine army, this vast concourse of peoples, comes against Israel fully equipped. Their plans appear to have been carefully laid. Adequate preparations have been made. From a military point of view, all the advantages seem to be with the attackers. But with Yahweh against Gog, Israel has nothing to fear. This was the prophecy in that time. It should have worked like this. As always, will it all have an application in this manner, if this is produced in our days and further on? 5. Persia. Earlier the prophets had summoned the nations living generally to the north. Interesting, eh? They lived in the north. The second group of nations lived to the east and south. East and south. Get yourselves in place. No immediately neighbouring nations are mentioned. Only those living in the confines of the known world are summoned to this battle. For example reasons, see on verse 2 concluding paragraph under Tubal. For a sketch of the history of Persia, see this book mentioned here. Now another analysis of a name that appears there, which is Kus, or Ethiopia. Cush, in the Hebrew, was son of Ham. Therefore, as you know, one of them that transmitted the most absolute paganism. It says, as in Genesis 10:6. His descendants settled in the south of Egypt in what was later Nubia, now southernmost Egypt and northern Sudan. See on Genesis 10:6. So we can start to see the towns and peoples that appeared mentioned in this text, where they were from and where they were situated. And it also mentions to us Libya, in Hebrew Phut, as seen on chapter 27 verse 10, which says this: They of Persia and of Lud and of Phut were in thine army, thy men of war, they hanged the shield and helmet in thee, they set forth thy comeliness. And here the explanation of the verse that mentions the Persians. Of Persia, Tyre was largely dependent upon mercenaries for the rank and file of its army. Yes, not only they were people of Tyre, but they also had people as mercenaries coming from Persia, paid so as to be their army. They mention Lud, and they say the Lydians. See on Genesis 10:13. And also it talks about Phut, which is the word that brought us here from Ezekiel. And it says, believed by many Egyptologists to be the same as the Egyptian Punt, a territory in Africa bordering the Red Sea. Assyriologists, however, generally identify Phut with a division of Libya. Well, we will see all of this further on a map, to see if there is a certain correspondence with what the prophecy was saying and certain territories that there are today. And we will see also how these territories are moving today in the actual days. And when I say how they are moving, I refer to on which side they are on, because we can see in the conflict today that there are two sides. We have on one side the bloc of the United States and his allies, and the other side we have the bloc of Russia and his allies, which are China, India, North Korea, etc. But there are others, hey? There are others in certain territories that turn out to be the same ones that some prophet quoted. Precisely another prophet named Daniel in the chapter 11, and that we have seen since the year 2001 with the famous 9/11. There started to be attacks on these lands that are Muslim and that precisely belong to the bloc of Russia, China, and so on. Yes, you can see also that the reasons are because of petroleum and gas, of course. But curiously, they are a series of territories that are appearing in the book of Daniel and slightly differently in the book of Ezekiel in these chapters that we are reading, 38 and 39. Shouldn't this make us think a bit? Let's continue to read. Gomer. Gomer was one of the sons of Japheth, as in Genesis 2 verse 1 and the first of Chronicles 1:5. A second Gomer is mentioned as the wife of Hosea, as in Hosea chapter 1 verse 3. The only other biblical occurrence of the name is this remark regarding Gomer and all his bands. None of these references throws much light on who these people were that joined Gog against Israel. Oh, so there isn't much light? Well, they have said and mentioned quite enough, and we will see more with God's help, of course. In the secular sources, frequent mention is made of the Gemiri, or the Cimmerians, see Homer Odyssey, who are believed to be the same people as Gomer and his bands. They were a barbaric horde of Aryans, who poured down from what is now southern Russia. Attention to this now, to what now is the southern Russia, in the 8th century BC over the land of Assyria and its neighbours, causing trouble and bloodshed, as seen in Herodotus, and see further on Genesis 10:2. See how interesting, it is mentioning here some characters, as known as the Gimiri, who are associated with who? It says who are believed to be the same people as Gomer and his bands. And where are they from? It says they are a barbaric horde of Aryans who poured down from what is now southern Russia. What is in South Russia? What area is the south of Russia today? Well, the south of Russia now has another name, another nation, where there now is a conflict. What things happen, eh? Well, let's continue. We'll see it step by step. Togarmah. Togarmah was the son of Gomer, the grandson of Japheth and the brother of Ashkenaz and Rephath, seen in Genesis 10:3 and the first of Chronicles 1:6. Outside of these two references, the name occurs only here and in Ezekiel 27:14, where Togarmah is said to trade in horses and mules in the Tyrian market. Historically, these people have been identified with the Tilgarimu of the Assyrian inscriptions, as seen on Genesis 10 verse 3. See that it is identifying different towns and people by name. We are going to leave it here today. We will carry on to see what here is being described in the chapter 39 of Ezekiel, but we will also see things from other sources that are going to leave us amazed and astonished, because this that we have seen now and what we are going to see in the next conference and probably the following one, plus the next conferences that will come after these, we will create a conjunction in which evidently the line of thinking will take us on its own to a prophetic interpretation that must be very considered in our days. Yes, in our days. Not only farther on when Jesus is to come, or for after the Millenium, but in our time. But time to time, and little by little, we will continue to show this, so that everyone can understand it, and also study it by themselves, and with much prayer arrive to their own conclusions. and once more, time to time, and let's not stop to pay attention to what is happening day by day in the current news. Because once you see the prophecy and the news, you come to a very clear conclusion. No? You will see. But all of this is preparing for the returning of Christ, because many things have to happen before 2031, and some of them that are quite strong are already happening. But this is not yet the end. Maranatha 2031. God bless you.